That morning began like any other for Henry Carter. Before the sun fully rose, he was already awake, moving quietly through the small apartment so he wouldn't disturb his daughter. Years after leaving the service, his body still obeyed the old schedule. At 5:30 a.m., every morning without fail, he checked Shadow's leash, running his fingers along the nylon for a phrase or weak points. He knelt to examine the dog's paws, watching closely for the subtle flinch that meant arthritis was acting up again. Shadow was 10 years old now, long past his prime. His once powerful muscles had softened, his dark muzzle streaked with gray. Sometimes it took him a moment to stand after lying down too long. But the instincts that had saved lives in places civilians never heard about on the news were still there, sharp and reliable. Henry had trained Shadow himself when they were both younger, back when they served together in a classified K-9 unit. They'd been more than handler and dog. They'd been synchronized, bonded by danger, trust, and survival. Shadow had been his early warning system, his shield, his lifeline. Then came the incident, an operation gone wrong. Politics, blame. SEAL files Henry was never allowed to talk about. The military thanked him for his service and sent him home with a handshake and a pension that barely covered rent. Shadow came with him, retired but still carrying every skill he'd ever learned. Now Henry worked construction when he could find it. Cash jobs, no questions. He avoided crowds whenever possible. Crowds meant recognition. Questions, people who might remember his face from old news stories and ask why a decorated handler was scraping by, raising a daughter alone. But that morning, crowds were unavoidable. Henry walked Shadow across the plaza, Gwen's small hand tucked safely in his own. They were heading to the school bus stop on the far side, tucked behind a row of newly renovated office buildings. Normally, Henry took the quiet side streets, but overnight construction had blocked the route with orange cones and barriers. The detour through the plaza would add time they didn't have. Gwen's bus didn't wait. Luxury cars lined the plaza, engines idling as a crowd gathered around a temporary stage. Cameras flashed. Banners fluttered overhead. Alexandra Reed, Tech CEO, media darling, stood beneath her company's sleek shield logo, signing a major security contract live on camera. Henry kept his head down. His worn jacket and old boots made him stand out among the tailored suits and polished shoes. But he didn't care. He just needed to get Gwen to her bus. Alexandra glanced over at the movement near the edge of the crowd. Her eyes landed on Henry, his jacket, the limping dog. She smirked. "Looks like we're getting walk-in guests now," she said lightly, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "Maybe he's here for donations." The crowd erupted in laughter. Henry felt heat rise in his face, but he didn't react. He tightened his grip on Gwen's hand and kept walking. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. He wouldn't let his daughter see him humiliated. But Shadow stopped. The dog froze mid-step, ears pricked, body tense. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Henry felt it instantly, the shift he knew better than his own heartbeat. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't fear. This was detection. Henry glanced down, his fingers brushing Shadow's collar in a subtle signal only they understood. Shadow's growl softened into focused silence as he adjusted his stance, scanning the crowd with trained precision. Across the plaza, Carter, the head of security, stood with his arms crossed, confidence radiating from him. "Perimeter's locked down," he said into his radio. "No one gets through." Henry was already through. A guard stepped forward, hand raised. "Sir, this is a private event." "I'm just passing through," Henry said calmly. "My daughter's bus is on the other side." The guard hesitated, but Carter's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Get him out of frame." Alexandra turned fully now, irritation flickering across her polished smile. She didn't see a father. She saw a disruption. Amanda, one of Alexandra's junior executives, watched more closely. Henry wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't even looking at the stage. Something about the scene didn't sit right with her, but she stayed silent. Shadow's body stiffened further. Henry followed the dog's gaze. 30 feet away, a man stood half hidden behind spectators. His posture was wrong, too rigid. His eyes weren't on the stage. They were tracking exits, angles, equipment. One hand hovered near his waistband beneath a jacket that bulged unnaturally on one side. Henry's stomach tightened. He stepped toward Carter. "There's a man in the crowd. I think he's armed." Carter scoffed. "I've got 20 years in private security. Everyone here's been screened." "He got in before your perimeter," Henry said quietly. "Or he has credentials. Either way, his positioning is wrong." Carter's expression hardened. "You and your dog are leaving." Shadow growled again, low, steady, controlled. The man in the crowd shifted. His hand moved. Time slowed. Shadow lunged forward, leash snapping taut in Henry's grip as the dog barked, a sharp, commanding sound that sliced through the plaza. And then the man pulled the gun. Chrome flashed in the morning light. Someone screamed. Panic exploded through the crowd. Henry dropped instantly, pulling Gwen down behind him. "Stay behind me," he said, voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. Otis, though Henry didn't know his name, raised a weapon, eyes wild, sweeping the crowd. Henry made his decision. He unclipped the leash. Shadow surged forward, not in rage, but with the calculated precision of a trained service dog. Low profile, perfect angles. Every movement deliberate, despite his age. Otis tried to turn the gun. Too late. Shadow launched. 80 pounds of controlled force slammed into Otis's center mass. Jaws locked onto the gun hand. Not tearing, not ripping, but applying exact pressure to force the fingers open. The gun fired. The shot cracked through the plaza, but the barrel was angled skyward. The bullet vanished harmlessly into the air. Otis hit the pavement hard. Shadow held. Henry was already moving. Henry crossed the remaining distance in 3 long strides. Years of training overrode hesitation, muscle memory taking control before conscious thought could catch up. He grabbed the dropped leash, looping it tightly around Otis's wrists, twisting and cinching until the man's hands were bound securely behind him. It wasn't official equipment, but it was effective. "Shadow, release," Henry commanded. The dog let go instantly, backing off 2 measured steps, eyes locked on Otis, ready to re-engage if needed. Henry quickly searched the man, waistband, jacket, ankles. No second weapon. He kicked the gun farther away, sending it skittering across the plaza stones. By the time Carter and his security team reached them, shouting orders with weapons drawn, it was already over. Otis lay face down on the pavement, wrists bound, Shadow standing over him like a statue carved from discipline and loyalty. On the stage, Alexandra stood frozen. The man she had mocked, the man she'd dismissed as a nuisance. He had just saved her event, possibly her life, and his old, limping dog had moved like a weapon honed by experience. Police sirens wailed in the distance. When officers flooded the plaza, everything shifted again. They saw a man on the ground, another man standing over him, a gun nearby. They didn't see a hero. Within seconds, Henry's arms were pulled behind his back, cold steel cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. "I'm not the shooter," Henry said calmly, even as his pulse thundered. "I stopped him." No one listened. Protocol took over. Gwen screamed as officers led her father away. "Dad!" Amanda caught her just in time, pulling her back from the chaos. Gwen sobbed, reaching out helplessly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Henry called, forcing his voice steady. "Stay with a nice lady. I'll be right back." Shadow barked furiously, claws scraping the pavement as a handler restrained him. The old dog fought, exhausted but unwilling to leave Henry's side. Alexandra watched, something breaking inside her chest. This wasn't right. At the precinct, Detective Lane studied Henry through tired eyes. 30 years on the force had taught him when stories didn't line up. "You gave a command to that dog," Lane said, setting 2 cups of coffee on the table. Sounded like K-9 protocol. Henry said nothing. Lane scrolled through a tablet. "Your records are sealed. Military K-9. Honorable discharge. Removed from active duty. That's the past. Witnesses say you stopped the shooter. Clean takedown. No excessive force." Lane met his gaze. "I've seen officers who couldn't do it better. Then why am I here? Because someone wants to spin this." Across town, Alexander stared at live news coverage. Headlines conflicted. Hero, suspect, vigilante, Ingrid Paste. We need to control the narrative. He tried to warn us, Alexander said quietly, and we ignored him. That's not good for business. That's the truth. Amanda entered, pale. Henry's daughter won't stop crying. Alexandra grabbed her coat. I'm going to the precinct. Otis talked. He hadn't been there to kill anyone. He'd been paid to cause panic. While everyone focused on the gun, someone else moved. Security footage told the rest of the story. During the chaos, a figure slipped into the technical area. 30 seconds was all it took. The prototype was gone. So was the code. Amanda checked access logs. Only 3 people had clearance. You, Carter, and Clinton. Alexandra felt sick. Clinton was arrested hours later, caught transferring stolen data to an encrypted drive. The conspiracy unraveled quickly. Payments to Otis, messages with rival firm, plans to destroy Alexander's company from the inside. 3 days later, Alexander stood before the cameras. No script, no spin. We failed, she said. A man named Henry tried to warn us. We dismissed him. His dog stopped an armed threat when our systems failed. She announced new policies. A fund for retired service dogs. Accountability at every level. Then she looked into the camera. Henry, if you're watching, I'm offering you a position as a security consultant. 2 days later, Alexander stood in Henry's doorway. Gwen stared. You're the lady from TV. I am, Alexander said, kneeling, and I brought medicine for Shadow. Henry listened as she spoke. Not excuses, but promises. Promises to listen, to change. Gwen tugged his sleeve. You should say yes. She seems nice now. Alexander laughed softly. 3 weeks later, they crossed the same plaza together. Shadow walked slower, his service day behind him, but his head was high. Gwen skipped ahead. People smiled. Some thanked Henry. Are bad things going to happen again? Gwen asked. Sometimes. Henry said, that's why we pay attention. Alexandra watched, understanding at last. Heroism wasn't about appearance or power. It was about seeing danger and stepping toward it. Shadow looked up at Henry, tail wagging slowly. In a world obsessed with image, the old dog had one final lesson to teach. Worth isn't measured by youth or status, but by loyalty, wisdom, and the courage to act when it matters most.